I'm Tim Jackson with Plum Creek, and Mr. Doherty asked me just to start by sharing with you the way we've been thinking about a development plan for this site, so we can see how we've been thinking about the conservation areas, the wetlands. So this is the concept that you've seen a number of times. And the purple is the outline of all the property. This doesn't show up on that green, right? It just doesn't show on the, see on there. That one disappears. If you look on this map, so what this is showing, what's showing here on the aerial are the wetlands and outlined in the buffers around them. And so the concept has residential down to the south. I can show it down here. Okay, I see what it is. I see what it is. I see what you're doing. Thank you. So the residential south of 20, and you can see there's a major wetland system here at the west end of that property, and another continuous system here. The two are a little bit connected, but right here. You go north, there is a system that exists here. Some of it's on concrete land, there and there, that runs here, essentially this direction. Thank you, Jeremy. And then over here, I'll go to that in a minute. We'll put that one up there in a minute.
Okay.
And then over to the east side, where the railroad track is here, you have the largest system, primary wetland system, runs north-south here, and the water flows this way. So you can see that. And if I can put up the concept plan, put it in the same place, and then you can shoot it. So you see the concept plan that we've shown a number of times starts by saying those major systems, we ought to protect those major systems. So you can see there isn't any proposed development in this major system there, in this system there, in that system that sits there, and in this system, right? So that's what the concept, how the concept plan was put together. And then in a little more detail with the concept plan, I'll show you, to start looking at south, because that's residential. Residential can work around even the smaller wetlands that aren't necessarily part of those primary systems. So in this concept drawing, the only potential wetland impacts that are shown there for a roadway, roadways to connect from 2082 north to get to State Route 20. That's the only potential wetland impacts that are shown in this concept. And the whole idea would be down there, you would develop the residential without impacting wetlands, because you don't have to do that in order to achieve that purpose. You can work around all those wetlands. The same really exists, same situation exists here on the very west side of the site. That other than this roadway, which is the existing forestry road here, there's really not a need to impact wetlands because you have small scale uses there that can be developed here. So the major systems would be protected, and then you'd work with the minor systems and just impact those where you need the roadway connections. And then over here, you can keep this major system and protect it. And then here, where you are constrained because that's the only place the railroad track is, so there's the railroad and the roadway, and where you need to put some large-scale industrial, that's the area that we have anticipated having some flexibility to go to the Corps of Engineers and to the city and ask to be able to impact wetlands in order to get the job, to locate the job center at this location, which is really its only alternative. It's the only place it can go, given the railroad track, the location of the railroad track. So that's Chris, that's the concept, conceptual approach we took to creating this concept. Okay.
And if we could turn that over to the PowerPoint. Could you turn it back just over to the PowerPoint? Okay, great. And to illustrate what Mr. Jackson just went through, again, this overlays the wetlands over the initial conceptual development plan. So it kind of shows you where those wetlands are in relation to the concept plan. Again, he mentioned the protection of the primary systems and what that looks like. Right here are these arrows showing you kind of the directionality and the major systems coursing through the project. On this slide, this is where we started discussing some potential conservation areas and what we could potentially do from a comprehensive plan amendment standpoint. On the dark green, you'll see under the EA con in the legend here over to the right of the graphic is the potential HCON conservation land use category. The light green is the wetlands, again, shown from the previous graphic. Now the potential HCON or EA Hawthorne conservation land use would designate the primary wetland systems as conservation. It would allow for the crossing of rail and major roadways to allow for access to the site. And it would also considering expanding the minimum requirements currently in the code for wetland protection, and that would provide a minimum 35-foot buffer, but an average 50-foot buffer. And this just shows you, take off the wetlands, this is what the potential, not proposed, it's just potential, just kind of a concept that we've discussed of what that HCON land use designation for those specific wetlands would look like. Now, in summary, as I just described, the HCON or conservation land use category. This is a new conservation land use category. The city has a conservation category already in its comprehensive plan, but it wasn't really developed with this purpose. If you look at the comprehensive plan, there's maybe 2 sentences that describe the conservation land use category in the comp plan, and it really was meant for more of a recreational purpose. So what does this HCON, this potential new conservation category, consist of? And it would devote those lands to conservation, and those would be unique natural functions within these lands. And it would also provide the same uses as the EA con conservation. Now, that's a new term. This comes from the sector plan. Try not to confuse anybody here, but which would include silviculture, recreation, open space, hunting areas, wildlife preserves, mitigation areas, water conservation, and low-intensity agriculture uses. So no row crops. Again, it would allow for those transportation corridors. When I mentioned changing the minimum wetland buffers, that would only apply to the EA Hawthorne mixed use area. So that purple area that we looked at before, that's what the potential change to the minimum requirements would look like. So at this point, since we've kind of gone through a lot of information, we'd like to go ahead and open it up for discussion with the commission. We want to get your feedback if you feel like this is the direction that we should be headed now that you've been presented with all the material, or should we go in a different direction? So if you could, what we have in front of you, we have a base map with some markers. You also have post-it notes. We have a flip chart there as well. So if you'd like to express any ideas, any concerns, we encourage you to either use your post-it notes to jot anything down and either put it on the map, put it on the board, what have you, and turn it over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Commission, any questions, comments?
I just have one comment. I probably should have been aware of this, but I guess I wasn't. what's the 30-foot boundary that we have? And with what we are presenting, or what you guys are presenting, is that we have a minimum of 35, but we can go up to at least 50. And is there a reason? I mean, I know some cases we can't do 50 on all of them, but is that possible? Or we be just fine with the 35? I know other cities have different, but I like the fact that we have the 50 feet. I like that buffer of that 50 feet.
Right. Now, the 35 feet is what's in the code, and so the potential change or the direction that we're looking at is adding that 50-foot average.
Okay.
So that would increase the buffer.
Good.
Now, I don't know if it would be helpful if we had a demonstration of how that works, because I know that concept might be, I don't know if we bring Mr. Dennis back
It's
up to show.
complicated.
It is complicated, so it does enhance or create a larger buffer. So, but if we need to demonstrate that, we can.
Yeah, if I could, Peter.
I don't think we need a demonstration. I just want to make sure that I interject something about the minimum of the 35 up to 50 feet. And I like that, 50 feet.
Okay, great.
I think one way to think about it, Commissioner, is what are the sites that compete with this site? Right? And what regulations do they have on them? You know, they're likely in Putnam County, they're in Marion County. So the idea is saying instead of just having a minimum 35 feet, the city might expand it and say, well, the average has to be at least, it has to be 50 feet, with a minimum being 30, no less than 35 feet. And that's what the city of Gainesville has that
I
same.
like that verbiage, Oh, that's not the verbiage.
Now, the 50-foot average, is that for each parcel? Is that for, what is a 50-foot average over, what are they taking the average over?
Now, from the way that I understand how that works, now that's on all of the wetlands within
The plan you develop.
within the PUD.
Okay,
So,
so that would average in all those parcels that are down there.
right, so you can't get any closer than 35 feet to the wetland. So at a minimum, you're gonna have a 35-foot upland buffer, but you have to maintain that 50-foot average across all of those wetlands within the PUD.
Okay. So currently, we just have 35 foot, and we're adding in, or it's suggested to add in the 50-foot average. That way, there's an overall, you're not having everything at 35 feet. You have some stuff that's further. That way, it brings out that average.
Correct.
And that's what the city of Gainesville currently has. Okay. Commission,
I like that.
any other input, commission? All right. And now, the counties for.
This one, on the letter that we got from the county, so for the buffer criteria, this would meet the needs of what they were talking about.
This is a kind of a separate issue. So that buffer is referring to a landscape buffer
Right.
between incompatible uses or in between two different uses.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay.
Okay.
And so this buffer, the 35-foot, is for wetlands. So you're creating that upland buffer of basically natural vegetation between a use or the building or structure on site and the wetlands. So you leave that open and you can't disturb that.
Okay, let me rephrase this question. I guess in the letter, it says, we are requesting that the city of Plum Creek further amend your comprehensive plan to improve our wetlands. So we've come up to those expectations with everything that we've had to comply with, right?
Well, today we're proffering a potential solution to the issue. Now, if it meets Alachua County's tastes, we don't know. We're here to provide a potential solution. I don't know that everybody will agree with that, but we are making our standards stricter, which is what they're looking for us to do. The thought was is that we have inferior regulation, and so we're making steps to make them more restrictive.
And it's designating the wetland actually, or the conservation actually areas, because we haven't had that on there before.
Correct.
So it's actually designating which parts are gonna be conservation areas instead of just everything being Hawthorne mixed use. And that's the second part of, their request was to designate the conservation areas.
Okay.
And so we,
Okay.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And that's why we felt like it was important to put those two issues together, because they do work hand in hand, the wetlands and the conservation. So that's why they were together in this presentation.
Okay, that's not okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner? Yeah, I myself like that it's going along with what the city of Gainesville has. I think the city of Gainesville and Alachua County are at times a lot hand in hand on what they're doing, especially since the counties is more of a rural in nature in the entire scope of things, and whereas the city has urban areas similar to ours. So I think it's real similar to each other that way. It's obviously stronger than what Putnam County has, and similar to what City of Alachua has as well. So that's another city that's pretty comparable.
Where's the train?
Yeah. All right, now, from here, are we gonna talk about the next issue, and then go into public comment at the end of it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Again, I encourage you all to, if you have, if a thought comes to mind and you want to jot it down and use the Post-its to put them on the base map, please feel free to do that. Okay. The next issue is the buffer between incompatible uses. Let me get to my spot here. My presentation here. So, what are buffers? What are incompatible uses? What are we talking about? When you typically hear this is usually the more intensive use, a commercial or industrial type use adjacent to single family residential. That's kind of the easiest example I can give you. And what makes adjacent uses compatible? And this is what we're talking about, the buffers, the landscape buffers, walls, and these help screen the noise or the visual impacts from certain uses from the residential, so to speak. And at what stage do we handle the compatibility issue? And really, the answer is we look at it at multiple stages. So we look at it from the comprehensive plan stage, we look at during the zoning stage, and then we look at it from the site planning or the development phase. And as I mentioned, what are the measures? And that could be the types of trees that you put within the buffer, the width of the buffer, the opacity of the buffer, or providing screening, which may be a berm or a wall, or a fence, a berm, wall, or fence. And there are considerations, of course, over time. So there's change in adjacencies, of course, as uses change on property. So when and if the external lands are annexed into this urbanized area, which we're referring to as the Hawthorne Urban Reserve area, which is denoted by this white dotted line, and I have this map here coming up. It's a little bit easier to see it on that printout there between the two screens, but that's your urban reserve area. That's the area that's expected to be annexed and urbanized over that 10-year period, right? and that we learned about this during the Hawthorne Annexation and the Boundary Adjustment Act. So what types of adjacencies do we have today? And based on the parcel data and the property use codes developed by the property appraiser, this map shows you the boundary of the city, the new boundary of the city of Hawthorne, which is in the black dashed line. Those yellow properties are residential properties. Now, what you see typically here in this area is predominantly rural agricultural uses with a smattering of single-family homes. It's hard to show you with the pointer. I wonder if we should
Stand up there.
I wonder if we should pull up that other the board with the uses on it. Apologize, the pointer doesn't work real well with the screens. So what we're talking about here are the yellow areas here as the residential, and here's this kind of this brownish area, which is that what is considered agriculture today by the property appraiser. This hatched area here is a conservation easement. So there may be some agricultural uses going on, but no single family will be allowed there. And again, we've got some single family here, along here. Agriculture, the black areas are vacant lands, so the lands haven't been improved with a structure or are being used for agricultural purposes. Again, this is according to the property appraiser. Down here, we have some agriculture, some residential, some vacant sites, and a large conservation tract down here, adjacent here to the Gainesville-Hawthorne Trail. Okay, and if I could jump back to the presentation. Now this graphic's a little bit easier to describe. What you see here are the future uses, or the future land use, which is predominantly the rural agriculture land use category. The only difference from that is the Rural Community Employment Center, which is shown there in the red just south of State Road 20.
That's a county thing with the Rural Community Employment Center? That's in the unincorporated area.
Right, that's on their future land use map. That's correct. Yeah. So what you see here are future adjacencies that there are no issues, or based on our research, they're not an issue right now. So the blue, that thick blue line on the perimeter of the property is where we've identified that there are no issues based on the future land use. So what you have down here in the bottom, south of State Road 20 and between the Gainesville-Hawthorne Trail, is residential abutting residential or rural agriculture. So that's what's in the comprehensive plan today. You can only do residential down there, and so that's why we identified it not being an issue. The other areas, for example, in the northwest corner, where you see the HCON conservation land use adjacent to the conservation easement, that's not going to be an issue in the future. So. Back to okay, so here we go. This is what I was describing here is this adjacency here. So you have a conservation land, budding conservation land, there's no issue at hand. Again, going back to what I described before, here is the primary residential area. Again, that's in the comprehensive plan, that's going to be developed as residential, and there are no adjacency issues. So as you can see, there are going to be some future adjacency issues, and we'll look at those in further detail here. If we pull up the other map, Clay, if you could, and if we could jump back to the presentation, please. So what are we talking about? So we have industrial adjacent to rural agriculture, or large lots, office to existing future, existing rural agriculture, moderate density residential to existing rural agriculture, and then industrial / office to future industrial, future office, and dense residential. So here are the ones that were identified that will have to be addressed. And these are future adjacencies. They're a little difficult here to see on this graphic. So those the red line on the perimeter of this graphic here show the potential issues. Those are the ones that we'll have to address with buffering and other things. So what you have here, this is the future land use again. This would be that those industrial type uses adjacent to rural agriculture, and if we're looking at existing uses, there's a smattering of residential uses. Again, down here, this which is on the south side and the east side of that, the large agglomeration of Hawthorne, you have the adjacency to, again, light industrial, adjacent to the rural agriculture land use. And as you see here, there is no red because, again, in our opinion, there are no issues with adjacencies. Now we have a couple others here, and again, that's the light industrial adjacent to